Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with an apology. These meetings are started at 7:30, and as you can see, we're 8 minutes late. And I apologize for that. Last-minute checking on whether or not Solicitor was going to be here this evening and whether or not his services were needed. And we were able to remedy our issue. Welcome to the meeting of the North End School District Board of School Directors, April 14th, 1998. The meeting tonight is a special action meeting. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 5 minutes. This limit will permit time for all those who wish to speak to the board to do so, and whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. And this is in reference to Board Policy 8344.2. So at this time, would Mrs. Klein lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Okay, members of the board, I need to recommend approval to appoint Dorothy Hatfield as Board Secretary Pro Tem for this evening's meeting. Motion by Mosey, second by Sharp. Questions left? Right? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, and again, thank you, Mrs. Hatfield, for being with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, audience of citizens would come first before any special action, so any comments that you need to make or questions you need to ask can be done so before a board would vote. Any members wishing to come forward from the audience, please do so and state your name and address. Yes, sir.
Bob Graziano, Telmenson. I was looking through the bid awards, and I was struck by two things. Number one is the few number of bidders, and also the large disparity between the bidders that were there for a specific category. Do we have any idea why we had so few bidders and why there might have been such a large difference in the amounts that they bid?
This can indicate on the one when there's a large variance. We broke it down, and they bid 3 times what they had been charging us, or a great deal more than what they had been charging us for prior work. Our estimates are in line with the lowest bidders. I don't know why we didn't get more activity. We posted ourselves on the internet as we were supposed to. I don't know how to respond to that. We solicited a number of vendors. We sent things out to them. These are the responses.
Other than just on the internet, we let vendors know that this was available?
Yeah, we advertised, and then we sent out to a mailing list all of our bid specs. So people called in for them, as they usually do, and also we sent out, to people who wanted to bid, not all of them returned.
Was there any concern brought forward by some of the vendors that maybe that didn't bid, that because of this whole E-rate situation, the guidelines they have to follow, that maybe they weren't interested in bidding?
I can't speak for the vendors who did not bid. I did speak to the vendors who did bid today on the telephone to confirm that they understand that 40% of their pay will come directly from the government, that the school board will pay out 60% and nothing more. They all understood that it was a split payment deal, and that they would have to fill out the voucher for the government and the vouchers for ourselves, and that if for any reason they did not get E-rate approval for what's it called, spin numbers, they all had their spin numbers already. They already got the commission approval as an approved vendor. It's now up to us. We're now the applicant waiting for approval. So each of these vendors has received a spin number. We do not have one at this point. We have to apply.
Okay, but the low bids, I think you did say, though, are in line with what we were expecting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Detty, to just hook on quickly to that question, did you check all this through our solicitor?
Yes.
The process through the solicitor?
Yes.
Yes, you did all that?
With Jack Dooley.
Okay. You had a short follow-up with Frank Bartle?
Had dealings with Jack Dooley, with Debbie and Kevin about a month ago to go over our schedule.
Okay.
And he helped us write some of the language in here that restricts the board's liability to the 60%.
Right.
And then over the weekend, starting on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday and Monday, I spoke with Mike Yanoff on other legal issues that we were dealing with regarding the
And then with Frank Barlow, you,
apparently Mike was his Frank.
yeah.
I didn't realize that, and then I just spoke with Frank, and
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're comfortable.
I'm resolved, yep.
Okay, thank you for getting the belt and suspenders. Appreciate your effort. Anybody else, please? One more time? Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Superintendent.
This is a limited special action meeting agenda, as is obvious. We have one action item to recommend that the board consider approving. We do recommend awarding of the bids as noted as the lowest and best bids for these services and materials. And I've asked Mrs. Deddy to elaborate, perhaps she's already done as much elaboration about the process, the complexity, the federal government's role, the solicitor's work to assure the board's protection in awarding a bid, and its obligation to underwrite 60% of it, and the federal government's role in assuming 40% of it. And Carol, I'd ask you if there's anything else that would be helpful for the board to understand why this was an arduous task, and you had to wait for the final results, considering the bid opening date and the tabulation and all the safety checks that were undertaken. Please do, Carol.
The board has heard these discussions now for the last 2 months, indicating we're on a critical path to getting something accomplished. And getting something accomplished was to get ourselves into an application status with the E-rate commission. We've handed out schedules that were called critical tasks or timeline, and it began on March 25th when we had to post the bid specifications on the internet, which we did. March 12th, we had to submit Form 470 to the E-rate commission, which we did. March 31st, we had a pre-bid walkthrough with the vendors that were interested in bidding the project, which we did. April 9th, which was Thursday, at 9 o'clock, the bids were due back to the district. The bids were received at 9 p.m. and 9 a.m., and we began analyzing them right through yesterday, and actually through today we had discussions, telephone discussions with each of the vendors to make sure they understood that we would be liable for the 60%. So I have to thank Debbie Klein and Kevin Eck for working the weekend to do the analysis. There were heaps and piles of things for them to go through and analyze. Ultimately, needed to check with the solicitor who was available to us starting Thursday, Friday, Sunday, and Monday on some issues regarding the bids, and we got our answers from Mike and then confirmed just now by Frank, who was dealing with Mike. So I think we're prepared to go. The issue is as follows. We have the opportunity, and I handed out what's called the E-rate opportunity sheet. We have the opportunity to apply for certain services to receive federal government subsidy. These bids total $764,000. The 40% discount comes to $305,000. Our total year one local expense is $458,706. Of these amounts, $616,000 on the top line is folded into the bondable amount that we've been discussing at the Finance Committee meetings. This is our last opportunity in terms of the deadline is tomorrow, and we don't have to award the bids tonight, but if we don't award the bids tonight, we can't apply for the E-rate discount. And that's not to say that that's the end of the world. If you don't apply for the E-rate discount now, all the people that are in the hopper, and there are zillions of districts, libraries, and so forth, will all come before us. And whenever we do finally get our application in, we may or may not receive funding due to the availability of funding. So it is to our advantage to get us in by, it's actually 4 p.m. Mountain Time, Iowa City time tomorrow. We have the documents ready for transit and ready to go. I think it's a great opportunity. So what I have also done in your attachments is if you go to the last page, which is marked 5, slide that's marked on the top right-hand corner. For the benefit of those who are not in the Finance Committee and haven't had the privilege of sitting through the last meetings, we presented or redone our numbers from year one, which is what we're talking about tonight. The shaded areas are those areas that are eligible for the E-rate discount, and these bid numbers are wrapped into the gray areas that you see here. The last time we had the budget, which was just last Wednesday, to the full board, to the Finance Committee, the budgeted number was $1,600,000. As you can see, that's gone to $1,379,000. So the numbers are fluctuating as the bids are received, analyzed, and so forth. That's all I have to contribute.
A good question was asked of me by board members I talked to today, specifically Mrs. Scherr, that we had on our agenda to approve for the possible approval of E-rate filing. And there was questions as to what are all these bid awards on here for? Why was that tagged onto the agenda? And I asked you that before the meeting. If you could give that answer again to the board, I appreciate it.
The E-rate application literally requires any entity, whether it be the public schools, the public library, to have done all their legwork. And when they apply, they have to have the vendors identified as to who they're going to ask to get the reimbursement for. So the E-rate application is literally approving us and the vendor that we submit. We could not submit an application without the name of the vendor. What complicated matters in our case was that the federal guidelines were significantly different than the Pennsylvania code guidelines. We were required to follow the Pennsylvania code guidelines, which were stricter than the federal guidelines. So we had to bid this local newspaper, bid it, and go through the process of the Pennsylvania code. We couldn't submit our application without the names of the vendor. It's not approvable.
Okay, and that's why they appear this evening. Okay, anything else, Doctor? For board questions?
No further comment. We'll certainly take your questions.
Okay, to the right, Mrs. Scherr.
Okay. Carol, at the time that we set this date, we sat here in March, and at that time you were looking for approval to submit the application, and the board wanted to have the joint meeting, another joint meeting with greater detail between technology, finance, and curriculum, which has now occurred. But the meeting was set because, as I understood it, we needed to approve the submission of the E-rate application. That's what the discussion revolved around as far as timelines and deadlines and why we couldn't wait until our Thursday night meeting, which is just 2 nights away, and needed to convene sooner. And yet, you've explained that in order to submit, we also need to have these vendors approved, but yet nowhere on the agenda is there anything that authorizes administration for submission of the E-rate application. So is it now true that you didn't really need board approval to submit the application itself?
Not actually for the application, but any of the vendors listed on there have to be awarded by the board.
What Debbie is saying is we didn't need formal board approval to submit an E-rate. We couldn't fill in the blanks without the vendor's name, so we do need board approval.
I guess it didn't come forward, the clarity of exactly what we needed to convene for, that technical aspect of awarding the bids as opposed to the approval to submit the E-rate. Now, these numbers are higher than the sheet we were given, and I know you gave us one total, but one of these happens to be a 3-year bid. The second one, dealing with Bell Atlantic Network. And while it's $125,000 for this year, it's $47,000 altogether under the 3-year bid.
If I may guess your question, the answer is the second year and the third year are also contingent upon E-rate funding. So you're only obligated to the 125 less than 40%.
Okay, so basically, though, these total bids are about $985,000, and we'd be looking at, our commitment would be approximately 60%, $591,000 if we move forward. Now, if we're approved for E-rate, are we still committed then to these bids? In other words, is it contingent on our approval, and therefore, if we're approved, we must then follow through in honoring the bids, or is it contingent upon the board's approval also of accepting the E-rate grant,
No,
if we should receive it?
As I understand it, the E-rate grant is an entitlement sort of thing based on your free and reduced lunches. So if you apply for it, it's like a Chapter 1 or something else, you will be notified about it. Let me read you the, thanks, Deb. Page 4 of the bid specs was the part that Jack Dooley had written in for us.
Right.
It says item D, and the bid specs are here, by the way, in case you're interested.
Pull your microphone over, please.
They were here last week, too. It says the North Penn School District is attempting to secure E-rate funding for this project. If the district receives funding, the bidder must apply to the SLC for payment of discounted services. The district reserves the right to cancel any and all portions of this bid in the event it is unsuccessful in obtaining funding. SPIN numbers, which they all have. SPIN number for E-rate participation is required before the contract can be awarded. The vendors that bid have already applied to the E-rate commission become a SPIN provider. Or whatever that means, I don't know what SPIN means, I'm assuming it's something official.
Provider identification.
All right,
Interesting play on words.
so we have SPIN bidders here.
Okay. Well, I heard the condition that should we not be accepted, but what if we should, through this process? There were questions as to whether or not if the level of funding wasn't everything that the administration desired, would this still be the first place that it would want to put its first $1 million, or would it perhaps make this step 2 or 3 down the road? Because certainly you have to have the expenditures to justify the grant money. So if this were removed off the table and we applied next year, if we no longer had the $900-some thousand worth of work that's eligible for E-rate, we wouldn't be applying for the same big dollars. So it would be a matter of shifting it off to another year to secure that money. And I'm wondering, is there provision there that if somewhere between now and when we receive word on the E-rate, whether it's full funding, whether it's partial funding, or it turns out to be no funding, and the board should decide, and perhaps even the administration itself, that perhaps we don't want to accept what we are successful in obtaining. Are we still committed to these bids?
I can't answer that. That's a legal question.
Because I didn't read what you read to me. I know it says contingent on, that it's contingent on us securing the E-rate, but we could get that and still, I don't know if everyone's 100% committed to the funding, because to make use of these things, if you let me finish, the infrastructure, the land and the WAN and the internet, you've got to have other dollars invested, or otherwise you have nothing to do with these things. So how much more money in the ineligible items that are absolutely necessary to have a fully baked cake out of this first nearly $1 million spending?
It's on the last page, is the full first year note.
So we would need all of that in order to utilize the land, WAN, and internet. We would have to be basically ready to commit to.
Yep. I would say yes. The question you asked me is if the bid, if I understood the question, if the board awards the bid tonight and it receives the E-rate financing, are we still obligated to do the work? And just the process, without the attorney present, is once the bids are awarded to these respective vendors, they will be required to put up what's called a performance bond, which will cost them money. And I would assume that if we then back out, we would have to reimburse them for their performance bond.
Or perhaps be held in breach of contract?
I don't have a contract.
Well, the award is an official action of the board.
I just can't
Being
answer
held
that
committed.
on a legal basis.
Okay, I'm sorry this is all coming up, but I believe me, we received this agenda in our packet Thursday late afternoon. When I opened it up, this district was closed on Friday and Monday, and I had expected that the meeting was basically for the generic approval of the submission of the applications till I saw this. I'll let John go.
John, any questions?
I don't have a question.
Okay, Carol, I thought I was listening to you, and you said something that, to the effect that there was language written by Jack Dooley, or legal language, that in the event that funding is not secure, that then we can be out of the project.
Right.
does that specifically name what funding sources? Because the district is a funding
Yes.
source.
It is, it names the SLC, which is the Commission, Library Commission,
Okay.
which is the acronym for the E-rate governance.
Okay, so that's the only funding stipulated to? Because as a funding source that, you know, boards come and go and change, and, you know, you can't force board members to vote any which way, and if they don't approve a fund, they're part of the funding source, that that's a, so that's not in there.
No, can I just read it again?
Sure, please.
I'll read it out loud, see if everyone interprets it. The North Penn School District is attempting to secure E-rate funding for this project. This is after pages and pages of generic stuff. If the district receives funding, the bidder must apply to the SLC for payment of discounted services, meaning that we're not going to pay for everything. They're going to get the payment directly from the commission. The district reserves the right to cancel any and all portions of this bid in the event it is unsuccessful, meaning it, meaning us, unsuccessful in obtaining funding. SPIN number for E-rate participation is required before the contract can be awarded. In other words, we wouldn't deal with any vendor that didn't already get approval from the SLC, because they may be bidding, and they can deep 6-hour application if they're not an approved vendor.
Sure.
So I don't know how else to read into that.
That's all right. Mr. Hill?
Yeah, as I understand it, and just to go back and understand when we started here, the point being is that this work that's being done under this E-rating of this local area network, wide area network, and internet services that we're talking about is something that has to be done. I mean, if we're going to, sometime, someplace, somewhere, it will be done in the North Penn School District to accomplish what we want to do. The question then became, do we want to do the things that are planned for this year, on the plan for this year that was over $1.4 million for this year, and go for this E-rate funding? And the question was, well, we don't know yet if the board is willing to put out $1.4 million for all those things this year. But the question, as I recall, to get to the point here, is that this local area wide area network and internet services is something that had to be done. If it has to be done, why not get, and there's a way to get federal funding or funding for this, or for the $764,000 that's here, we can get $305,000 for it, that we shouldn't back away from that money. Now, if we're successful in getting the 40% discount, and we proceed with doing this work, and in turn the board decides not to spend $1.4 million next year on the plan as laid out, but says you only spend $1 million, of which which half would be for this, then the other half would have to be earmarked for something else, meaning that this work that was done here may be required in future years, may not be utilized in the first year.
I'm asking Debbie to respond to that.
Is that like a statute of limitations?
No, all I'm trying to say is,
I think you're just making a point, not a-
well, the point I'm trying to make is that we went through this E-rate funding, we went through this whole exercise to get $305,000 back from the federal government. If we don't get $305,000 back from the federal government, everything's off and we start again and we decide what we're going to do. That's a given, that's what you read. If we do get the $305,000 discount, and we must then proceed, as the interpretation is now, we must proceed with this work and spend $458,000 or $500,000 roughly this year. And if the board decides to spend only $1 million total, just as a number, for technology next year and not 1.4, that means that some of the work that was part of that 1.4, if $500,000 is in this internet, if it's in this wiring part, would have to be done on something else, meaning that we may not utilize fully in the first year what we're spending the $500,000 for, but we may utilize it the next year, but we'd still save the $300,000 and some. Am I confusing?
No, I got it that time. Can you look at the summary sheet called E-Rate Opportunity, and I'll walk you through what this year's investment is? The 616 on the top line with the asterisk is bondable. That's not going to come out of whatever your budget allocation is for this year. Let's say you put up $1 million for technology implementation for next year. Of that $1 million, 125 and 23, 125,000 and 23,000 would be coming out of that $1 million allocation, because the 616 will be bonded. You don't pay that in the first year, all at once.
But that'd be less 40%.
But the 125 plus the 23 less 40% would be the amount that you would be dedicating towards the infrastructure in year one, out of whatever allocation you so choose.
Okay, that's what I understood.
Okay?
So I guess my position, or my feeling is on this, if you get the 40%, if we get the 40% funding, I don't see how we can refuse it and not proceed in that area. That seems like it would kind of be foolhardy, but that's my opinion. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Shapinsky.
I gather from some of the questions that I guess some of the difficulty that everybody's having grasping this program, or what we're talking about tonight, is once we sign on to this, short of not getting the additional funding from the council, we're going forward with this plan. And it basically is the first step to get this plan on the road. I have a couple of questions for Carol on the changing of the numbers. I have the original financial summary you handed out. Why did the computer cost drop by about 45%?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me. No, actually, and I apologize, but the Finance Committee was privileged to the explanation, not the full board, or the Technology Committee. When we got into the logistics of implementing the plan as it was presented April 2nd, we interviewed the engineer who did the electrical study. And we're not prepared to do this, but let's say we awarded the design of the electrical work for the elementary schools tomorrow, and he started designing it, and then we bid all the electrical work out by July. They couldn't possibly build out the elementary schools before December. So what we did is we delayed the elementary school computer implementation by 6 months, not buying the equipment until January in our model. Since if we bought it ahead of time, we'd be paying on it and we'd be able to plug it in.
Why the drop at the high school and in the middle schools?
Did we also prorate that?
We extended those months
We dropped those down a couple months
to January.
to
You
January.
pushed it back.
We pushed back the timeline, and that's what it's reflected.
For the same reason or parity?
Logistics.
Under the shaded area of the land, WAN, and internet numbers, they went up $66,000. Was that a result of these bidding?
Correct.
The network infrastructure went up $407,000. Why?
Again, because of the bidding of lower prices.
$400,000 more than you estimated? Didn't I just hear somebody say our estimates were in line with the lowest bid?
The initial, as you know, had, I'm not saying that this is that, but from April 2nd to the last Finance Committee meeting, we redid the finances and found several mortgages that weren't carried forward and several errors. I think the bid results are most of the change for year one, that and pushing it back 6 months. Implementation is pushed back 6 months is the second big change.
What in the world wouldn't you have carried forward? $400,000 in the first year, you're not carrying anything
No,
forward.
I don't, that's why I don't think the 400 was there.
Basically, what you'll find, the biggest change in that $400,000, I believe, is changing the network component, the
Yeah.
electronic component.
I can see that. That's why I'm asking what it is.
And that's just finalizing design and numbers.
We had a grand total of infrastructure over, or I guess the services for networking, and including the infrastructure of $1.8 million, roughly, in the original estimate. What is it now, over 3 years?
Okay.
I mean, the first year already changed $400,000, so obviously this number's not accurate
No,
anymore.
and let me make one more very important point. You can't hear me.
I have 3 years.
The old and the new.
I have 3 years.
One thing that we did do is for the electronic components, network electronics, we had to make a shift. And so in your first year, we're taking more of a hit the first year, and therefore the implementation in the next couple of years is reduced because of that. So we're building up that base more in the first year than we had hoped. We were hoping we could spread it over more evenly over the 3-year period. But to be most cost effective in doing so, we had to take those, absorb those costs the first year. So that's probably the greatest increase you'll find there.
Okay, and somebody tell me what the second year and the third year are?
I don't think I have it.
We didn't do that
Get
normally
that.
because we just finished this about 4:30 today, year one.
Here,
Certainly
the
achievable.
first year total of this program now is $4.2 million as spending, which of that we can bond out $2.8 million, which includes $1.6 million in electrical upgrades, which I assume is at the elementary level. So you're talking about $125,000 to $140,000 in elementary school to wire for electricity.
6,000?
There's around 66 per building. The other infrastructure is the furniture.
No, I'm talking about the electrical.
The electrical, the 1.6 million is solely for the
Elementary.
elementary schools.
And what I'm saying is the cost breakdown per school, it seems extremely excessive, considering I contacted Mafacton today, and I contacted Upper Dublin Thursday. They spend anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to wire their elementary schools, which are virtually the same size as ours. And I think that's extremely expensive as a comparison, yeah.
Data cabling or
Between
electrical?
28 and 34 classrooms per elementary school.
I mean, there's a difference.
Data cabling or
Yeah.
electrical upgrades?
The electrical upgrades we're talking about.
I think Art can respond to it. All of our buildings have the same electrical specifications, so that the new buildings need additional capacity brought to the
Almost
building.
50,000 per school.
If you want to expand upon that.
We, in looking at this, Vince, we allocated 4 computers per classroom.
Right.
A computer on each desk where we had workstations, whether it would be the librarian's desk, the secretary's desk. And one of the things that has happened, as many of you know, we're no longer in the milliamps. We're now into heavier amperage. So we're dedicating 2 computers to every 20 amp service. So in a typical classroom, we're putting in 40 amps of additional electric. And I have faith in the numbers that Mr. Trock gave us. I mean, his estimates are always good. We've never, in any of our bidding situations, we've never been embarrassed by his estimates. And there's a lot of work that has to be done. And in some buildings, we have to come from the street side in, right past the service and go in with new switch gear. I mean, some of our buildings just aren't capable of adding that much capacity. And
It just seems a bit pricey compared to another school district that has the same kind of building, same kind of problem.
I understand
They run
that.
6 computers in a classroom, and they don't spend as
I
much as
would be
we do.
interested in seeing their bids. I mean, I know Biro did Pennsbury, they did a number of school districts to date. And maybe if other people are doing it for less, we have to see what they're doing. But
I assume that they bid out the work,
they have to.
because, I mean, I think that's what they were talking about. I don't think they used any in-house personnel. I guess the question I had, I didn't have the updated figures, so I'm only using the figures that you gave me for the 3 years, and I did the comparison. And yeah, it's changed dramatically, $400,000+. Now, if you're telling me you're front-loading it and we're taking it off the second and third year, I'd just like to see that, okay? Because this is a major change in the cost of what we're planning on doing now. And also, the computer costs have gone down. Now, if you're pushing it back, that means you're blowing up the second year in computers, which means it's going to go up in the second year.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Okay? It's going to change it around, and I want to know what the final deal is, because you're asking me to vote for something tonight, and yet the numbers have just completely changed within a day.
Yeah, I don't know if Rita took an hour, whether she could do the second and third year. But the other thing that did change, which we forgot to mention, was that there was some concern from members of the board that we were going with a 4-year lease, meaning in the 3rd year we decided to keep it or not. These numbers also reflect a 5-year lease as opposed to a 4-year lease, so we've extended the life of the computer for the 1 year. So that suppresses the numbers even farther in terms of the hardware costs.
Well, we're lowering our average cost up, but we're keeping the equipment for another year too.
Exactly.
In our buying model, you were using a 35% replacement factor
In year
in 4,
yeah.
5, 6, and on, which means we virtually roll our computers over.
Every 6 years.
Yeah, well, actually every 4th year, if you look at it in that form. My question becomes to you, I like the plan that they originally brought forward, and I was supportive of it, and I understand what we have to do to set up the foundation for what we have to do, and I would love to get the 40% back, but I really would like to see final numbers before I have to pass a vote on something like this.
Right.
Because this thing could turn into a hell of a lot more than we were told. It already has.
Right.
I would really like to see the final numbers before we move forward, because I know we have to build the foundation to do this, and I know we have to move forward. And it's a hell of a shame that we got to do this by 4:30 tomorrow afternoon.
No, it has to be done, so we
I understand.
can't wait till 4:30, they close.
No further questions.
Carol, you said something that maybe you were joking. Can Reba take an hour and go to bed?
So much for our finance meeting tonight.
Well, the new funding is based on
Can I just
what
take a minute?
the numbers change
These
dramatically.
two ladies.
Yeah, but the e-reading is...
40%. I understand that. That's why I said I don't mind the finance.
Folks, let's take a 10-minute break, please.
I don't mind the film.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a meeting until the camera kids say it's a meeting. When you come in and, here, come on up. Start the meeting, please. You students have patiently waited for us every board meeting, and we beat you back, so you might as well start the meeting.
Hit the gavel.
Go right ahead. Go ahead. Good. Thank you, dear. Thank you. Good job. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We did need a little bit of time. We needed a recess, and we appreciate the opportunity afforded to us to have employees pull their heads together, because we're up against the wall, and that's the fact of it. Mrs. Klein and Mrs. Reba and Mrs. Deddy said that they could pull forward the numbers requested by, well, all of you really. Mr. Shapinsky brought it to a head for year 2 and 3. So what I want to do is get your pleasure on how you want to proceed from here. The ladies could use an hour. Here's a few ideas. We can go around and take questions, let Carol field them. Finish up those questions. Any additional questions from the citizenry? Let's field those questions. We also have on deck, Mrs. Sharon, the Finance Committee has that. They're set up in the back here, all ready to go if they would wish, and then we can come back and re-adjourn for continued special action. It's still, I guess as long as we keep it before midnight, it's still the special action meeting on the 14th. Is there a wish for these ladies to even proceed? If there are not enough board members that they even go to that extent, that the support is not there anyway, then I don't want them to put in an hour's worth of time to come back on a nay vote. So is there a commitment to let those women go and bring back year 2 and 3 for you to look at? Can I start, let me start this way. Mrs. Sharp?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really interested in seeing the change of the numbers between the pluses and minuses. We've got over $600 and some thousand worth of hardware that's now being pushed to year 2. Plus, I see under the other total that we had of $4.1 million, we were then also including a part of that was, we also had under interest and principal $378,700. That's not here now because
It's a
you
yes or
moved
no.
it
Yes or
in?
no.
Do you want them to go back
So-
through the numbers?
I definitely think we need to have those numbers to move forward. I hate that we're in this position
I agree.
of having to deal with this tonight with a gun to our head that
Okay, so
we're
it's
gonna
just, I just
blow
want them
it.
to feel released to go do it, but if they're wasting their time, let's not do that. Mr. Schilling?
No.
Okay, Mr. Hill?
No, I don't want them to do it, and I want to see the numbers, we've got to look at that, and we're having a meeting on the 20th to go over this thing in detail. But it's a question tonight, do we want to go for a $305,000 saving this year or not? That's a yes or no question, whether they come back, no matter what piece of paper they come back with. So I don't want to see them waste the time.
I asked for it tonight. I want to see it before we just move forward.
Yeah, but
I support it, however, as an accountant, I hate anybody putting me under the gun, because then you make mistakes.
we'll be here all night
So I
arguing
would
about the
not want you to make a
rework.
mistake and then you'd be embarrassed, and you really want to double check your work.
Well, what we're doing is Reva and Debbie will actually do the numbers crunching and the table comparisons. I'll do the auditing afterwards. So I will be available to do the finance committee meeting because they're doing the modeling. I'll do the review of it.
To answer your question, I am a supporter voting yes tonight for it.
Mr. M?
No.
Mrs. Krieger?
I just have a couple of questions in relationship to this E-rate application, Carol. Is it my understanding that we are going for the E-rate application to include this attached, is it just the 1 year? Just this 1 year here?
Yeah.
Okay, this is all we're applying for E-rate, is this $764,510
Yes.
in the first year?
Right.
Okay. Number two, we're contracted for a 3-year contract for internet service, though, according to the bids that are attached, is that correct?
No.
Don't need the others.
Okay? I don't need them to come forward because I think we're being premature anyway with this E-rate application, and I think that we've been rushed to judgment for this application this year. I don't see us getting computers in the classrooms any quicker by us getting this allotment or this discount in the upcoming year through the E-rate program. The E-rate program is not going to go away. Telephone users are being surcharged for E-rate on their monthly phone bills. And whether we apply this year for E-rate for the specifics of LANing, WANing, and interneting, or if we apply for it next year, I thought the top priority of this board was to get computer technologies into the hands of the students. And what I'm seeing and what's being told to me tonight, actually I don't have a very good understanding of who in the first year of this is going to benefit from LANing, WANing, and interneting. It doesn't sound like it's going to be the children in the classrooms,
It's only the middle school children and the high school children.
okay? How?
First year.
Well,
Okay,
Well-
these specs, these
no.
bid
Let
specs?
me give you a scenario, and I'll keep it simple, because I don't always understand it technically. We're in this room, we're typing stuff in. Over there in that room, they're typing stuff in, okay? When I leave the lab, I can't type anything in anyplace else remotely. We're not tied together. This room and this room, the computers don't talk with each other or to each other. Then if I want to introduce, and this is totally a board decision, so folks, it is your decision. If you want internet service at your upper grades, totally your decision. You need to have the computers that talk to each other and talk to the internet provider. It's not an option. If we don't do this tonight, that's fine.
Okay,
But
but that's-
recognize we will not have internet access for a whole year unless you want to pay for it. The whole thing is $305,000 more. Those are decisions. If you don't want the internet, that's
No,
not
not
a
the
problem.
internet, that's not what
The
it is.
internet's only 23,000.
But you can't use the internet unless you have to tie the computers together.
No, I understand that, but when did the board decide that we were going to provide internet service for the middle schools and the high schools? When was that decision made? Did I miss a meeting?
We did a policy.
We did a policy.
For that purpose.
No, I know, but when did we decide as a board that we were gonna provide that for the middle schools and the high schools in this upcoming year?
We haven't yet voted.
We haven't voted yet.
No, we never
Okay.
talked about it.
So, but there must have been direction that went somewhere, some way, shape, or form, and I'm asking, did I miss a meeting where it was decided by either the technology board committee or the administrators that this upcoming year was the year that we were gonna provide internet service at the high school and the middle schools when we're still expanding the high school and we just awarded the upgrades to the labs or the libraries at the middle schools? Where did the direction come from? I'm lost here. And when I look at this bid spec package and I see page after page of appendices attached, which really doesn't tell me anything except list classrooms for English, dining room 1, dining room 2, dining cafeteria, storage room, with all these things, greenhouse, and all these little things that are coded here. I mean, are these bid specs going to be attached to the E-rate application?
Those bid specs are what the vendors responded to build their prices upon.
Okay, but my question is, why, if we were gonna apply for E-rate for this first year, and it's $764,000, and at the bottom, and you're asking for, I see, for all three of these things, LAN, WAN, internet, and the network infrastructure, it's $1.2 million roughly. For these 4 items on your first page thing. It's just not adding up. It's not I really don't, I feel like I'm being asked to put the cart before the horse
I
here.
understand it. The gray areas are what are available for the E-rate funding,
I
okay?
understand that.
Only the services that we have here were the ones that we put out to bid. There's other things such as electronics that are included in the infrastructure numbers. So when we look at a number and try to find the 616,000, when we go to the line of gray, there's an additional amount in there that equals 1039, 1,039. The 616 is a subset of the 1039.
Okay, now the 616, you say is bondable.
Yes.
Okay, did the board give direction that we were gonna bond that? Did I miss another meeting?
We have, let me back off a little bit. This whole thing was based on the report that we had the other night showing the 4-year layout, 3-year layout that we had. In the first year, all of that stuff is in that plan. The board has not approved that plan. Only thing the board said was that there was a chance to get the E-rating for this year to save some money. Let's take a look at the E-rating for the internet wiring that's part of Plan 1 or Year 1, and let's see what we could save in that. That's what the $764,000 and the $458,000 is. If we don't get the funding for the 40% funding, then everything is off, and you still got to decide what you're going to do with technology next year and next 3 years. If you do get the funding, you're committed to do this internet wiring that you may, then you got to decide what you're going to spend your other money on that you allocate for the first year for technology. The board hasn't decided what they're going to spend it on yet. So there's no commitment to anything other than putting the capability in here for this internet wiring, which we're going to need sometime, someplace, somewhere in the future. We could use next year if you want to fund all the money for it, or maybe take 2 years to get use of all of that. The only thing you're voting on tonight is it worth to put that wiring in now to save $305,000? Or do you not want to vote on it and wait and decide what you're going to spend all the money on and maybe get it in future years?
Don, would you buy an internet service if you didn't own a computer?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't
You're not
disagree
buying the
with
service.
Well, you're and you know, and you have, if I misunderstood Carol, then I'd like her to correct me. Didn't I ask if we invested in those eligible items, what would we need to spend to have a fully baked cake and be able to utilize the LAN, WAN, internet, and network? And I thought you'd said about $1.4 million in order to fulfill the usage of those, of all that wiring and
I may have
equipment?
misled you.
Okay.
Let me try it again.
Because we've got a $4.2 million plan for just this upcoming year.
You've invested, can I just take a minute and
Sure,
take you through?
sure.
You've invested in IMCs, and libraries at
Right.
3 middle schools and 1 high school. In addition to the IMCs in each of those buildings, you have, I'm not sure how many computer labs at the high school,
right.
but you also have labs that exist. I believe you also have computer labs in the middle schools. Okay, this infrastructure will tie all those existing assets together. So in terms of the middle school and the high school, the wiring, we just couldn't do the elementary, but the wiring will tie all the computers that are spread throughout the building together this year.
Our existing assets will be tied together under this plan.
Yes.
And they will have the
Isn't it
capability to
hard-
build upon it, correct?
Can I just finish my thought?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I said that, and that's all true, recognizing that certain laboratories are already 5 or 6 years old, and they won't accept.
That's all.
They're not working now, let's put it this way. Kids don't have the classes properly to afford it now. We have to replace some of that hardware. It's on a limited basis, like, I just know off the top of my head, the business education lab,
English
what are they called?
lab, the English lab also.
Tech labs,
Uh-huh.
whatever, old term business ed. Right now, the equipment isn't working, so while we have computers in the classroom, they're not working. So you can't plug them into this new structure and expect them to work. So there is some renewal in the first year for the middle and high school, very little. So when, I think the question that Vicki, sorry, Vicki asked is, do we have to spend another $1.4 million at the middle schools and the high school to make this thing
No, through
chug?
this,
And the answer is no.
throughout this plan, for
You have-
year 1 out of the 4.2 million.
No, you don't. You do not. You have a considerable number of rooms with computers sitting in isolation right now at your buildings, at those 4 buildings.
I didn't think, that I was concerned that the equipment really would not be capable of really utilizing, especially the internet
It will be.
usage and et cetera with memory
It will
and.
be, except in
and
the
the-
classrooms or the laboratories where the computers currently aren't working. We can't make them work.
But we're reducing hardware so much that that's my concern, that if we're cutting back on the computers while we move forward with this much
But
of
we
the
never had a lot
infrastructure.
of computer hardware in the plan for the middle schools and the high schools, because you've invested very, very heavily in the last 3 years in those computers.
Carol?
A lot.
On your E-rate opportunity analysis, the discount is $305,000
Correct.
on the front sheet. On your summary for funding sources in year 1, it's $517.
Okay.
Now, why is there a difference? Does that include other things? And if
Yes.
it does,
Yes.
what are we getting back on the back sheet that we're not getting back on the front sheet?
Okay. If you look at the shaded areas on the
I have.
back sheet, you'll notice, for instance, on the network infrastructure, which is the bottom shaded line,
Right,
the number is $1,039,000.
right.
Of that, only 616 is for the local area network. The rest of it is electronics, which have to be bid and purchased. We still get the discount on those items.
Which are related to this plan,
Yes.
but they're not on the front sheet.
No,
You didn't add it in.
no.
Why? You don't think we're going to get it?
No, we're just not prepared to do it at this point. And what I said to you April 2nd, it hasn't changed. We need to go as slowly as we need to, step by step. We're not prepared to, we're not prepared
But
to
in,
do
but in your
something
estimate, you're
quickly.
counting it in on your estimate.
Yes, we are. And I believe on the application, we will count it in as an allowance, and under state contract, they will accept any state contract.
So potentially, we could get even more back than what we're looking at here.
No, we can only get 517 the first year.
Well, no, I meant
That's what
305,
you-
yeah. Okay. Hey, all right.
Okay.
I wonder if this issue could be resolved if the wording in that contract could include conditional to the formal acceptance of the grant, if received. I wonder if whether it would be accepted by those vendors or not. It would give us the safety net, and if we move forward, it's no harm having that extra protection in there.
Let me just say to you, and I know some of you have the bid specs.
I don't.
Some of the bid specs are date specific. If you noticed, it required them to jump through this hoop on July 15th, that hoop on July 16th, and the other hoops. So we'd have to give them leeway to ignore those dates, and that's our prerogative to do, is to give them that leeway.
And if we are awarded an E-rate discount, the project has to be completed by December, is also my understanding.
Yeah, it has to be done this year. It
December 31st.
has to be done this year to
It
get the
has
money
to be
back.
done this year, correct?
Yes.
I take counsel, I don't know.
I was told that by Jack Dooley. That's
Right.
what he told me. All the work
So-
has to be completed by December 31st, 1998.
Right, so am I to understand that what you read from Mr. Dooley, if we award these bids and we don't receive, or if we do receive awardment of the grant, but we decide as a board not to fund the rest of the project that went in on the bid, we could still be held in contempt of the agreement?
Somebody asked me that
liable?
earlier, and I didn't know the answer to that.
It's
Okay,
not in-
so, in essence, I need to know exactly what I'm committing myself to in the application of this grant if we get the 40% for the first year. I'm committing to a total of, right now, I'm being asked to commit to bidding awards that total $764,000, regardless if I get the grant or not.
No.
No. We have an out if we don't get the
Excuse me?
grant.
They
Carol?
answered for me. I think the answer was no, but I got lost when I jumped on it. What was the
If
question?
we award the bids,
Yes,
okay,
yes,
and we don't get the grant,
right.
are we still liable to go through with the awarding of the bids?
Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, if we are awarded a grant, but we don't fund the balance of this money, this $458,000, then we'll be in trouble.
That's the
As a
question
district.
I wasn't able to answer because it's a legal question. I don't know the answer.
Well, I mean, this doesn't help me out as an elected official at all. Not at all. And, you know, I mean, this was a special action meeting, I don't understand why the solicitor isn't here. We've been having 2 or 3 legal questions come up tonight. The solicitor should have been here tonight. And like I said, I have been feeling rushed to judge whether or not this is the time for the district to be applying for E-rate discounts. We're piecemealing a technology plan together. In essence, that's what we're being asked to do, is to piecemeal a technology plan together, and I don't like it. And we've been dealing, with technology and trying to get technology into the hands of the students, and like pencils and paper and books, and, now all of a sudden, because we won't commit to providing internet service first, somehow we're anti-technology or something like that, and I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And without last week, folks, who was it that gave us that 7-year spreadsheet in the finance
I
meeting?
did.
Mrs. Debbie.
Did that come from you or from Reba?
Well, both of us.
Okay.
All 3 of us, actually.
$21 million plan, folks, over 7 years. That's a lot of money. And that's exactly what the plan, as laid out and specified, looks like. And it wasn't too long ago when we had a $25 million long-range plan over 6 years that this board said, whoa, we're on the same course we were before. So, and still, it's another year where elementary kids aren't gonna get their hands on technology. I still don't know how many classrooms or how many students or the percentage of students at the secondary level will realize technology next year. And there's just a lot of unanswered questions, and I think it would behoove this board and its administration to decide what it is you want to do next year in regards to technology. What are your priorities? I didn't think that this board's priorities, first priorities, were to do these particular areas first.
Okay, we have two ladies that went back to do some work. I was trying to get a consensus. It's not clear it's going one way or the other.
I don't need to see any numbers.
Do you want, you don't need any numbers, Mr. Mosey? You need any more numbers?
I'd just like to ask one question. I have several questions, but I'm not going to bore you with that. Vince, you're not in favor of them doing the numbers tonight?
No,
voting
he's,
on this?
no, he wants
wanted
numbers.
it. I mean,
Frank
they're
wants the
asking-
numbers.
They're asking you to take a bite
John
of the
did,
apple
Vicky
without telling
did,
you
I
how big
did.
the apple
If
is.
they
No, I
want us
know,
to
but-
vote tonight.
But are we voting not to have them go through this
That's what she's
exercise?
asking.
4 people have agreed, they'd like to see years 2 and 3 fleshed out here as Mr. Shapinsky requested. I believe I have heard from those that don't want them to bother with that because they're ready to vote tonight positively to move ahead with the E-rate.
Okay,
I don't want those women to work in vain. If there's people already committed, but there's people that need those 2 other years to decide, their vote is not decided, then we're willing to go through that exercise.
I'm not going to vote for it, but, because I just think the numbers have changed too dramatically. I mean, Mr. Shapinsky made a statement that we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago where he said it's not very prudent to spend $5 to save a quarter. And I look at $305,000 that we're going to save, and we're going to commit to a $4.2 million plan. No, I'm sorry. And I just see, like Vince, I had the same question you had, Vince. The infrastructure went up $400,000 in the last meeting. That they're all over the board. And just, if I can, we had a January 3rd
Okay, so you
meeting.
don't want years 2, and you don't want the
No,
second
I
and
want to
third
see
year?
years 2 and 3, but I don't know if they
Carol,
have to go
there
through
are
it tonight
5 board
because I'm
members-
not going to vote for it tonight.
Okay, see, that's what I'm trying to establish.
Yeah.
The women are back there willing to work on that now. They've said they could get those numbers back here in an hour. It doesn't obligate your vote one way or the other. Do you want those years of numbers?
I don't understand Russian through it. You bring those sheets out, we're going to be arguing over those sheets.
If there's a consensus that there's 5 board
I
members.
absolutely agree. It's not, this is not perfect. But I know that there's a timeline here.
Yes.
And either we capture the opportunity, but as far as.
I feel like a gun's being held to our head and it's unnecessary.
Sharice, I've been feeling like that for 6 years, so I know your position, but we're looking at a situation here for internet. I think the board does want to see technology at the elementary level, but I think we have people that feel that high school students, with money's already spent in labs, the IMC, et cetera, that internet is not a trendy new thing being captured by the district. We've been through trends around here. We've been through new math. We've been through PUMSE. This is not a trend. This is stuff that's out there. It's technology. It's being dealt with every single day. It's like a fax machine.
let me ask you a
And I
question.
believe that there's board members that feel that the high school should have it, and I believe every high school surrounding us does.
Let me ask you a question. How does the internet, may I ask Dr. Hassler, tie into next year's curriculum? How does internet access at the secondary level tie into next year's curriculum?
In a sense, it would be an addition. We also talked about the language arts software and the math software. Now, that's our main focus. My understanding, and Deb could be really clear on this, is that this provides us the opportunity to access the internet. But that wasn't our main focus in the area of curriculum. It was the language arts and it was mathematics, and then I would say would be the internet piece of it.
It's equipment. It's a
So we
tower.
may not even be ready to go with internet.
Madam President.
Yes, sir.
I want to clarify something so everybody understands what I was asking for. I just wanted to see what the full picture was before we start on this road, okay? The numbers have changed dramatically since my last presentation.
Me too.
Okay? And you're asking me tonight to make a leap of faith and trust you. I supported the foundation of the technology plan. I supported how we were going to do it. I had some questions about how we were going to finance it, and that's where we got hung up. And I don't know if the Finance Committee handled that question yet. okay?
No, we haven't.
What we're asked tonight is to make a leap of faith. If you're asking me if I'm going to support this plan tonight, I will support it under that guise. So I'll take that leap of faith and support it. But don't disappoint me. Don't come back here and tell me this plan turned into $35 million. Don't come back and tell me this thing has been revamped. You're asking me to make a leap of faith on what's on this paper tonight, I'll support it. But don't change it too much. Because this is based on what we were told 2 weeks ago.
But Vince, it's already changed.
There's already 600.
They're telling us they're front loading it. I want to see it.
Vince, I got to bring something out to you as a member of the Finance Committee. I don't know how we can even make a recommendation like this, and we haven't even discussed technology.
Well, so far, Carol has told us that
or
they've
even in
shifted.
finance.
They have told us they've shifted some of the monies back and forth. If the plan remains the same, I want to see it. That's all I want to be. That's all I want proof of before I vote.
Okay.
That's all I asked for. Okay. If that has changed, okay, dramatically, then I have a question about the plan.
Okay, other board members have a question. I know Mr. Mosey had the floor. Bill Allen?
Thank you.
I just passed my time over, I just wanted to answer the question, do I want the ladies to do? My answer was no,
But you support?
I have some other things I'd like to say. that's
Well,
all.
then
But
then
if Pat's
go
got the
ahead.
floor, go ahead, just come back to me if you would.
Pat, you still want the floor?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, sir.
We never received a copy of the contract or the application. Was that because there was a time deadline here? I know at the meeting we had in April that there were a couple of board members that wanted to see that. We never, either the application or,
The original E-rate
yeah.
application.
I think she's coming tomorrow.
I know that meeting on April 2nd, I thought that was going to be forthcoming.
You had the blanks one day. I saw somebody had the blank forms one day. There was only a couple boxes. You fill in your name, address, social security number. It's not like, it's not.
Oh, it didn't have any of the legalese or anything on it?
Oh.
Okay.
It's not basic, because.
Well, what are you reading from then? Is that from something our solicitor gave you?
And that's what they handed out, the bid
Yeah.
specs?
That's
Yeah,
not-
I never got that.
That's just bid specs.
Did anyone get the copies of the cost allocation paper that I have?
Wait,
I thought
wait,
that it says here.
I was
Folks,
patient while you all
Mr.
asked your questions. Can I
That's
have the
correct.
floor for about 10 minutes? Jeez. I know it may be redundant, but I'm having a very difficult time because it seems like the game plan has changed here. I was always under the impression that if we applied for the E-rate discount and we received it, we then had an option as a board, it would come back to us, and we would then have an option as to whether to continue and move forward in the project the way it was originally laid out, or, you know, could we have a change of heart? And I felt comfortable with that. Now you're telling me that's changed, because then we're leaving ourselves over some possible liability and paying some fees for bonds and so forth. Because we haven't, you know, we're about halfway through getting a budget for this district. And you know, we haven't made a decision on technology, how we're going to fund it. And to make that kind of a commitment tonight where we don't have that option, that to me is for lack of a better term, it is putting us in a box. Let me ask you this if I can, Carol. What was the opening day to start submitting applications for the C-rate?
January 1st, 1998,
January 1st. And when did we submit our application?
March 25th. Most other not-for-profits had their application prepared last November and December and had it submitted January 1st. I can only tell you the rationale was that the window was supposed to open actually January 2nd, first in the door as of January 2nd. And what they did is they said, because we can't deal with it and some of you weren't prepared, they said the full window goes from January 2nd to April 15th. All of you who accumulate your applications in that period of time, when we open the door on the 15th, all of you will be considered number one. So we almost lost the opportunity completely to even participate in this by not having had some form of a plan or design done.
The reason I ask that is because when we applied for the Link to Learn funds, which I think we had to have a plan in place, we had applied by the end of November. I know the board gave Mr. Weir and the administration direction at that time to start preparing for this E-rate. Why we lost 3 months, to me, it's unacceptable. I mean, I'm not blaming you. I don't know who dropped the ball, but if we knew back in November the door was going to open January the 1st, and we didn't do anything till March 23rd, and now we're sitting here March 25th, I guess you said 23rd, whatever, and we're sitting here like 3 weeks later, and we have to make a decision tonight, and maybe here till 12 o'clock to make this decision, to me is totally unacceptable. I'm sorry. Somebody can swing for this one.
Responsibly, this board, as any other board, should have awarded these kind of bids and had a plan going
That's right.
back to last September,
We talked
October,
about it in
November.
October and November, Mrs. Day.
You know, I look at it, we're all newcomers, and we don't take the blame, let's bounce the balls as high as you like. The fact remains that we're a little annoyed that we had to pick it up in
I agree.
January and rush through this.
And I agree with you. I agree with you
Frankly.
100%, because I know that direction was given back in November when we applied for the Link to Learn to put ourselves in a position to apply for the E-rate. And,
But we
you know,
can't capture that.
I know we can't, but to put us in this kind of position
How
is...
do we do it next year?
uh,
How fair are the kids? Doing it next year is...
So you're saying
Kids
then,
are
if
not
we
guilty.
approve this tonight, and we, regardless of what amount we get, if we only get $25,000 or $50,000, we don't have an out?
Oh, no, I didn't say that.
We would have to get the whole 40%?
Yes,
Okay. But you're saying then that once we get that 40%, then we have to go forward with that program? And just so I understand you,
same question somebody else asked.
I know it's been asked several times, but I just want to make sure. We would then have to commit to this $4.2 million technology?
Absolutely not.
Oh, no, okay,
That one I do know.
okay.
Um,
Well, you know, I look at your list here, and you have 4.2 million. I still don't see any number on here for air conditioning and ventilation. And I know in talking to Mrs. Klein, that's something that we're gonna have to look at. And any of these sheets, I don't see that number. And, you know, again, there is, even if we get the 305,000 and we commit 458, I think what Mrs. Klein said, if I heard her correctly, there's still going to be some additional expenses we're going to have to commit to implement this LAN and WAN and internet infrastructure. Am I correct?
There's the electronics.
So this $764,000 isn't going to be the end all for these three areas.
I don't, and I've said this to you 3 months, 2
I know.
months ago, there's
I
no
know.
end in sight. When you start
I
going towards a
understand.
technology plan, it's a minimum of $2 million forever and ever.
That's
And
right.
God knows what decisions
And
future
I
boards make.
don't think a lot of
It's a
people-
program just like phys ed. It's
Yeah.
there, and you pay the people every year, their salaries go up, their benefit costs go up. It just gets larger and larger, it multiplies.
But kickballs are cheaper than computers. Trust me.
That was a bad analogy.
Bad analogy. I know what you're saying.
Public speaking is not my forte either.
That's all I have at this time.
Okay, now, let's bring this back. Mr. Allen, you had questions.
Just a couple of quick comments as how I'm approaching this whole thing, that I think in the perfect world, yes, we would not be doing this first, but somebody is giving us an opportunity to have them give us $300,000, and I don't mind jumping through a few hoops to do so. And I don't think it's ever wrong to have this school district have a local area network and a wide area network. It's not going to be a mistake. It's something that, even if we don't go through with the balance of the program, it's not a mistake. It will be used. So let's get it. We have the opportunity to save the money and get it in first, only because we have the opportunity. And I don't think it's committing us to anything. And you can, if you feel like it's a commitment, that's on yourself. But you don't have to do another thing. It will still be a useful investment in the school district, and I plan to support it. Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell, coming back around. Anything? Mr. Shapinsky?
I can't add anything else to it.
Bill?
No.
Schilling?
Yes, Mrs. Denny, I know this question's been asked a lot. Again, if we support this, I'm supporting this, but I'm still confused regarding, what we have to do. It's definitely not $4.2 million, correct? That's been established already, that if we commit to this, we're not committing to a $4.2 million plan.
We can't afford 4.2.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm trying to narrow this down.
Right, okay.
I understand that we have the computers, this will be used. I look at it as a foundation being laid, and we build upon it. Is that correct? Are my assumptions correct here?
You're correct. The first year cash outlay is $1,379,000. And
If we approve this, then it's 1.3, is that what you're saying?
if you,
Wait, Sue, please.
sorry, if you approve the E-rate
Yeah, but,
application,
yeah.
it's a $458,000 commitment for this year. But I thought you were asking what the full plan entailed.
No, what I'm saying is if I commit to this evening, what am I committing to financially? Am I committing just to these numbers right on this page right here?
At this time, yes.
And that's, in other words, we commit to this, and we are not liable to go further, if, I'm not saying we will not go further, but that's what I'm asking. In other words, this is what I'm committing to.
Yes.
You're not gonna come back and say, okay, John, now we have to spend $1 million to complete a project because of this, to get this E-rate, right? Am I correct?
we're
So this
done.
is it right here.
That's it.
And if we want to build upon it, and you're talking about other equipment, if we want to do that, that's to our prerogative, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll support it.
I want to be clear that I'm supportive of the internet for upper grade levels. My concern is over the equipment being able to accept it and what the commitment would really have to be in new equipment in order to fully utilize it. But when it comes to this 4.2, Carol, it's on our agenda from just tonight. Now, I just heard you say that you're recognizing that we can't afford the 4.2 this year, right? Didn't you just say, well, no, we can't afford it?
I would hope the finance committee would concur.
Well, no argument there, but it is year one for 98.99 that's sitting before us tonight as we sit here. It's a newly dated piece, so it's gone up from what we had just the last meeting of on technology.
What was it? Maybe you have it on that sheet.
Before, it was 4.1, but that included another $400,000 or $500,000 in hardware, and that also included another $360,000 for bond principal and interest. So essentially, it went up 100, and then there's about $900,000 that's now being deferred to another year,
Good bond.
right?
See bond principal and interest?
Right.
Over it's 470. It's included. I've included it. Okay, on that part.
On year one? No.
We're spending this, we get this back.
No interest in, well, this says over here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the issue being, if the 4.2 isn't considered affordable, as you've stated now, how do we get a picture of what we do intend? What's now being asked for, even within year one? They're busy working on year 2 and 3, and now year 1 that's sitting in front of us isn't exactly what we're...
When the purpose of the finance committee meeting tonight.
Even
was
for a
to-
technology plan, though.
No, but it was to look at the overall budget, and we were given a certain objective to reduce the budget proposal a certain amount. When we submitted last week, the budget proposal on page 61,
Right.
61, was in the neighborhood of $1,600,000. Okay, that has been reduced to $1,379,000. The question that the board is interested in, can this board afford $1,379,000 in year one and incorporate that amount of money into next year's budget? That only the board can answer. Okay, but that is the requirement to fulfill the plan as it was explained and prepared as to the best of our ability for year one.
The cash outlay.
Yeah, I mean,
But that cash outlay has to be attached to some bondable expenses, otherwise you,
I have it.
the cash outlay, so, I
look at the
mean,
bond issuance.
right, I know it's in there, I'm just saying that it's attached to spending bond money,
Yes, yes,
2.8 million.
correct.
That would have to be acquired and rolled over for this year, correct?
Yes,
2.8 for this year.
and the issuance cost is $26,000, and the principal and interest cost, and I think I went over this on a 12-year level debt basis, is $470,000.
It's over with.
Any more questions?
Okay. One other question on the application, since we're all so confused because we thought that's why we were coming here tonight, was to approve it to be submitted. I had the cost allocation papers at our last meeting. Debbie Klein took them from me because she wanted to review and evaluate what excess-based versus content-based actually meant in eligibility, in the eligibility terminology. I'd also asked that she forward it to the other board members Now, that was dated, I think the date on it was March 14th. And that was the first day that it said that the guidelines were now being released for the E-rate.
March 12th.
Well, that was the new date. I was hearing that this was all being applied for in December and January, but I know when I pulled off the website, it was dated like March 12th or March 14th, and said that today, was it PUC or not PUC, Universal has released the guidelines, cost allocation guidelines, and, the eligibility criteria. So I was wondering, how did they have applications coming in back in December and January when they didn't tell people what it is that they could apply for?
That was part of the issue, is that they had set January 1st or January 2nd, 1998 as the deadline, and then all of the not-for-profits said, we don't know how to fill out the forms, because you haven't put the forms on the internet for us to plug in our name, address, and phone number.
Right.
And based on that condition, it was a mutual default, that they had to extend the window to April 15th.
Right, but I don't see how we could have been that far, because if we'd acted back in January, February, many of those people may have had to pull their applications because they weren't.
Guidelines haven't changed
Under them.
substantially in terms of what's eligible. I mean, I know there's a lot of, I hate to say, there's a lot of interpretation of what it is, a lot of writers, a lot of authors making big bucks out of this thing. Things haven't changed. The form itself, it's pretty basic.
Well, regardless of what we do tonight, could you follow up with Mrs. Klein on distributing that to the board? Because when she took my copy last month, I asked if she would forward it in the next courier packet, copies for the rest of the board, particularly the technology committee. And we'll let it go at that. I have a finance meeting that I'm not sure.
Okay.
We're not going to be
It's,
too bleary-eyed to
gotta leave
begin
right
with.
Let's ask for the question.
Are you, what?
Well, ask for the question. Just get over with.
It's
For the other-
There's a call for the question?
Yes.
Members of, wait a minute. Members of the board, before you is a recommendation to award the following bids. These bids are necessary to be plugged into the E-rate filing already done by Mrs. Steady. Motion on the floor by Hill. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by O'Donnell. All in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed would say nay.
Nay.
Roll call, Mrs. Hatfield.
Allen,
Yes?
Hill,
Yes.
Krieger,
No.
Lozey,
No.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Sher,
No.
Rapinski,
Yes.
Schilling,
Yes.
Engel.
Yes.
There are 6 yes, 2 no.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved. It's a tough one.